The morning sun fell gently over Delhi, casting golden light across the wide streets and the restless noise of a city that seemed always halfway between its ancient past and its bold future. People hurried to offices. Cars pressed horns in frustration. And somewhere inside the Prime Minister's residence, Narendra Modi prepared for a meeting unlike any other. The world outside thought it was just another meeting between a national leader and a global executive. But inside those walls, it carried the quiet weight of something more personal, something that touched the roots of human struggle, and the small invisible sacrifices that shaped destiny. From the moment Sundar Pichai stepped onto Indian soil, there was a stirring of emotions that he himself found difficult to put into words. He was no stranger to India. It was his birthplace, the soil of his earliest dreams, the narrow streets of Chennai where he had once walked to school, the crowded buses where he had clutched railings, the small home where his mother cooked simple meals with quiet care, where electricity was uncertain and where the family shared one telephone. Yet this time was different. This time, he returned not as the boy who once squinted under dim lights to finish his homework, but as the CEO of Google, a name spoken in boardrooms and classrooms alike. And the thought of sitting across from the Prime Minister of India awakened something fragile inside Heyman, awareness of how far he had come, and how much of that journey was not his alone. That as he walked into the residence, his mind was restless. Flashes of memory collided with the present. He remembered the old television set his father saved for, the way neighbors would come to watch cricket matches in their living room. He remembered the way his mother never complained when she stayed awake to make sure he had dinner after late study sessions. He remembered how his parents sold jewelry, their most valued possessions, just to ensure he could fly to America for his studies. Each sacrifice had been small in the moment, but together they built a bridge across oceans, carrying him to a life that seemed impossible when he was just a boy with curious eyes and no clear map for the future. Modi greeted him with a warmth that was formal yet deeply human. The cameras captured their handshake, the still images spreading across newspapers and screens. But what the cameras could not capture was the silence that followed after the press was ushered out, leaving just the two men in a room filled with unspoken expectations. The Prime Minister leaned forward, his eyes steady, and asked a question that pierced Sundar's composure. "Tell me," he said softly, "when you look back, what gave you the strength to endure everything, to walk this far?" For a moment, Sundar did not know how to answer. Strength was a word people often used when they looked at his journey, but he knew the truth was different. He was not the sole bearer of that strength. His strength had been borrowed, stitched together from the patience of his father, the resilience of his mother, and the quiet faith of every teacher who believed in him when the world outside only saw limits. In that instant, he felt his throat tighten, the kind of tightness that comes when the heart remembers more than the mind is ready to speak. He opened his mouth, and the words came slowly, like a river reluctant to break through stone. "Sir," he began, "strength is not something I carried alone. It was in the silence of my mother when she endured. It was in her quiet eyes that never demanded recognition. I think of her more than anything today." Modi's gaze softened. The silence in the room grew deeper, like two lives separated by time, yet bound by the shared knowledge of what it means to be lifted by someone else's sacrifice. As Sundar spoke, his mind pulled him backward again, further and further, until he was no longer in Delhi but in the small streets of Ashok Nagar. He could smell the dust rising after rain, hear the bicycles rattling over uneven roads, and see himself walking home with a notebook in hand. He saw his mother waiting at the doorway, her sari faded from years of washing, her face marked by lines of both struggle and endurance. She rarely spoke about her hardships, but he felt them in the way she carried herself, always choosing to protect his dreams instead of voicing her own. The memory stung, because now he sat in a place of global recognition while her sacrifices remained hidden, unspoken in history's shadow. The conversation shifted to technology, to India's future, to the role of innovation in lifting millions out of poverty. Yet beneath the formal words, Sundar's mind kept circling back to one truth. This meeting was not about policies or programs, at least not for him. It was about honoring the invisible backbone of resilience, the quiet figures who gave without expecting. And he wondered if the cameras could hear his heart. Would they understand that every decision, every product, every step he had taken in his career was, in some way, a tribute to the woman who never once asked for applause? The minutes stretched. The conversation deepened, but there was a moment when Modi leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Our mothers," he said quietly, "they carried more than we can ever repay." Sundar's eyes widened slightly. The Prime Minister's words felt less like a political leader speaking and more like a son remembering. There was a pause, heavy with shared humanity. Two men, so different in paths, yet suddenly equal in their gratitude to the silent women who shaped them. Sundar felt something shift inside him. This was no longer just a meeting. It was a mirror. And just as the thought settled, an aide walked in, placing a small folder before the Prime Minister. Modi opened it, glanced at the contents, and then slid it across the table, towards Sundar looked down, his breath catching as his eyes met the first page. His hands froze above the paper, trembling slightly, because what he saw was not statistics, not policy, not a corporate proposal. It was something personal, something that struck the deepest part of his being, something he had not expected to ever see in this room. The air seemed to thicken, his heartbeat quickened, and for a moment, Sundar felt the ground beneath him shift, as though the past he thought he had left behind was now standing uninvited before him. He looked up at Modi, who simply nodded, waiting for his reaction. Sundar swallowed hard, his voice caught between disbelief and fear, and the room fell silent again. What was inside that folder was about to change the entire tone of the meeting, and Sundar realized in that instant that he was not only here as a CEO, not only as a symbol of global success, but as a son facing a truth that had remained hidden for decades. Sundar stared at the folder before him as if it held a secret map to a forgotten life. The paper felt heavier than it should have, the weight of memory pressed into its thin sheets. He hesitated before pulling it closer, almost afraid of what he might uncover. When he finally opened it, his eyes locked onto a photograph he had not seen in decades. It was faded, its edges curled, but he knew instantly what it was. There, in simple clothes, stood his mother outside their old home in Chennai, the very home where dreams were born in silence and carried forward without complaint. She was younger, her face marked with the same quiet strength he remembered. And behind her the narrow doorway seemed to whisper of evenings filled with oil lamps and modest meals. Sundar's throat tightened. This was not supposed to be here. How had it come to rest on the Prime Minister's table? Modi watched him with steady eyes, not rushing, not intruding, simply allowing the moment to unfold. Your story, Modi said slowly, is not just your own. It belongs to India too. We searched, we spoke with people from your past, and they gave us pieces of your journey that the world has never heard. Your mother's neighbors, your old teachers, even the shopkeepers who remembered the quiet boy who asked too many questions. They all spoke of her sacrifice. Sundar felt his pulse rise. It was one thing for him to remember his mother's silent strength. It was another to see it recognized in official records, preserved as if history itself had bent down to acknowledge her invisible battles. He turned another page and found a letter in neat handwriting. The script instantly familiar. It was his father's, written in Tamil, translated on the side. The letter spoke of worry and hope, of the struggle to send his son abroad for education, of selling small possessions and counting every rupee. Sundar read the lines with shaking hands, each word carrying the echo of late nights when his parents whispered about money, careful not to let him hear their fears. Tears burned in his eyes, but he blinked them away. He was not here to break down. He was here as a representative of countless sons and daughters whose journeys were built on the quiet courage of parents. Yet the weight pressed harder. He wanted to breathe, but the room seemed too full of memory. Modi leaned forward. You see, Sundar, people talk about technology, about progress, about wealth, but behind all of it lies a truth that is rarely told. A mother's sacrifice is the foundation of greatness. Your story is proof. But I must ask you, what do you carry now for her? What do you give back? The question pierced him. Sundar had given speeches, donated to education, built opportunities for others. Yet, at that moment, he felt small. What could ever repay a lifetime of sacrifice? His mother had given up dreams of her own, and he had turned them into roads that led him far away. Did she feel left behind? Did she ever wish he had stayed closer? The guilt stung, sharp and unrelenting. His mind wandered back to a night long ago. The electricity had failed again, and he had studied under the dim light of a candle. His mother had sat beside him, fanning him gently so he would not sweat too much in the humid night. She said nothing, just sat there, her presence like a shield against despair. Sundar realized now that in all those moments, she had carried not only the weight of poverty but also the responsibility of keeping hope alive. She had been the quiet architect of his future. And here he was, across the table from the Prime Minister, struggling to find words that could match the truth of her silent labor. Before he could answer, Modi gestured to the aide, who placed another envelope on the table. There is something more, Modi said, his voice low. Sundar hesitated, his palms damp. When he opened it, he found a letter, written not by his father, not by officials, but by his mother herself. It was written years ago, never sent, discovered in an old box by relatives. The handwriting was uneven, almost trembling, but the words struck him like thunder. She had written of her fears when he left for America, how she cried silently each night but never showed it in the morning. She had written of her pride, her faith that he would not forget where he came from, and her one hope that he would always carry kindness above all else. Sundar's chest heaved, and for a moment, the powerful CEO disappeared. In his place was a son, reading the quiet voice of a mother who had spoken only on paper. Hidden from the world. The room was so still that Sundar could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. He looked up at Modi, unable to hide the emotion on his face. I never saw this, he whispered. Modi nodded. Sometimes, our parents leave us messages we are not ready to hear until later. Perhaps today is that moment. Sundar closed the letter gently, as if afraid it would vanish if handled too harshly. Then Modi's voice grew firmer. carrying both compassion and gravity. There is a reason I showed you this now. You are not only a son, but also a symbol. India sees in you the story of millions who dream but do not yet have the chance. Your mother's sacrifice is their sacrifice. Your journey must become their hope. Will you carry that responsibility? Sundar felt the weight of expectation pressing down heavier than ever. The world had asked him to lead a company, but here was something larger, a call to represent an entire generation of silent mothers and determined children. Dad, as he struggled to form a response. Another thought pierced his mind. Why now? Why had Modi chosen this exact day, this exact meeting, to show him these personal letters and photographs? There was a reason hidden beneath the surface, a purpose not yet revealed. Sundar felt a chill run through him, sensing that this conversation was about to shift from personal memory to something far greater. Something that could change not only how he saw himself but also the path ahead for millions of others. The silence stretched, heavy and unbroken, and just as Sundar prepared to speak, Modi leaned back, his eyes narrowing slightly, as though preparing to reveal a truth that would shake the ground beneath them both. The Prime Minister leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady yet unreadable, and for a moment, Sundar felt as if he were being weighed by an invisible scale. The silence was heavy, filled not with emptiness, but with the kind of pause that carries hidden meaning. Sundar tried to prepare himself, though he did not know for what. He had faced questions from journalists, pressure from shareholders, scrutiny from governments, but never before had he felt a tension quite like this, personal, intimate, and yet somehow vast, as if the room itself had grown larger and more demanding. But, finally, Modi spoke, his voice low but edged with conviction. Sundar, he said, there is something you must understand. India does not only celebrate your success, it depends on it. Your mother's sacrifice was not for you alone. It was for something greater, though she may not have known it. And today, I must ask you to consider what you will do with that inheritance. Sundar blinked, his mind racing. Inheritance. The word struck him differently, not as wealth or status, but as a responsibility passed down, fragile yet binding. Modi continued, when we spoke to those who knew you, they did not speak only of your intelligence. They spoke of your kindness, your humility, your patience. Those qualities are not just personal virtues. They are tools for leadership that goes beyond the walls of a company. Technology is powerful, but without compassion, it can destroy as much as it creates. I believe you are meant for more than algorithms and profits. Sundar felt a shiver run through him. Was this simply praise, or was it something more? He thought back to the letter he had just read, his mother's trembling words telling him to carry kindness above all else. Her wish echoed now against Modi's challenge, as if the two voices had merged across time and space. Sundar realized this was no coincidence. The Prime Minister had chosen to show him the letter before speaking these words, as though to anchor him in something unshakable before revealing what lay ahead. Sundar's hands clasped together tightly. Sir, he said carefully, I have always believed technology should serve humanity. That is why I worked to make information accessible to anyone, no matter how rich or poor. But what you are asking, what exactly do you mean? His question trembled in the air, and he felt his own voice betray the uncertainty he usually hid so well. Modi's eyes narrowed slightly, though his expression softened with a quiet understanding. You know what India is facing? Millions of young people full of talent but without the means to grow. Villages where children walk miles to schools that have no computers. Mothers who sacrifice everything, yet their children still remain trapped. We can build roads, we can build buildings, but without knowledge, the next generation will never break free. Sundar, I want you to help us change that. Not as a businessman, not as a CEO, but as a son of this land. The words struck like a thunderclap. Sundar leaned back, his breath caught in his chest. In boardrooms, he had been asked to innovate, to strategize, to lead. But this was different. This was not about products or quarterly results. This was about shaping lives at the most fragile level. He felt the weight of it pressing down harder than any responsibility he had known. His mind drifted back again to his own childhood. He remembered sitting in classrooms with cracked walls and broken fans, the chalk dust filling the air, and the hunger in the eyes of children who wanted to learn but could barely afford books. He remembered how teachers shared more than lessons, they shared belief, as if passing a torch in the dark. And he remembered the shame of not being able to answer simple questions when electricity failed at home, and he could not study as others did. He had lived the struggle, and now he was being asked to return to it, not as a victim, but as a guide. Sundar opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was no easy answer. He thought of his mother's face in the photo, her eyes quietly telling him that greatness was never for oneself alone. He thought of her letter, urging him toward kindness. And he thought of the millions of mothers across India, each silently fighting battles no one would ever write down. Could he carry them too? Before he could respond, Modi leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. There is something else you must know, soon. There is a reason I called you today, a reason I placed these letters in your hands. It is not only about what you can give, it is also about something that has been kept from you, something about your own family, something that has been waiting for this moment to come to light. Sundar froze. His pulse thundered in his ears. His own family. He looked down at the letters again, his mother's handwriting trembling on the page, his father's hopes etched in careful lines. What more could there be? What had been hidden all these years? He looked back up at Modi, his lips parting, but no words came. The Prime Minister's eyes held his unwavering, as though bracing him for a revelation that could shake the ground beneath his carefully built life. Sundar's heart raced faster, and for the first time in many years, he felt like the boy in Chennai again, standing at the edge of a truth too big to grasp. And then Modi spoke just 5 words. Words that changed the air in the room, and sent Sundar spiraling into silence. Asterisk. Modi's voice carried a weight that made every word feel like stone dropped into still water. Your mother, he said slowly, was not alone in her struggle. There was something she kept from you. Something she carried in silence all her life. Sundar felt the ground shift beneath him. Silence. His entire childhood had been filled with it. Not an absence of love, but the quiet endurance of a woman who refused to speak of her own pain. What could she have hidden? And why was the Prime Minister of India the one to reveal it? His heart pounded as he leaned forward, eyes fixed on Modi's face, searching for clues. His mind raced back to small details he had never questioned. The way his mother sometimes stared into the distance when she thought no one was watching. The way she folded letters quickly when he walked into the room. The quiet tears she wiped away before serving him food. He had always believed these were the marks of hardship, of poverty endured with dignity. But now, sitting across from the leader of a nation, he realized there might have been more. Modi placed another paper on the table, his hand steady. This, he said, was found among old records in your hometown. It is a document your mother never wanted you to see, at least not while she was alive. She believed you would only understand its meaning when you were ready. Sundar hesitated before pulling it closer. The paper was yellowed with age, its ink faded but legible. His eyes scanned the words, and with each line, his breath grew heavier. The document spoke of his mother's life before marriage, a life Sundar had never truly known. It revealed how she had once been offered a scholarship to study further, a rare chance for a young woman of her time, but she had turned it down when her own family needed her, sacrificing her dream before it could even take shape. Sundar's chest tightened. He had always assumed his mother had lived quietly, content with simple routines, but here was proof that she too had been chosen by destiny only, to step aside so that others could move forward. His mind reeled. She had given up her own education, her own path, and years later, when he needed support, she had given again. Every sacrifice she made was not only for him but also a reflection of the dream she once carried and buried. Sundar felt a sting of guilt so sharp it was almost unbearable. How had he never known? How had he never asked? Modi's voice broke into his thoughts. Your mother was more than the background of your story. She was a leader in her own right, though she never stood on a stage. She believed that one day, her silence would give birth to a voice that could not be ignored. Do you see now, Sundar? You are not only her son, you are her continuation. Sundar's hands trembled as he folded the paper back, his mind storming with emotions. Memories resurfaced with new meaning. Her insistence that he study hard, her refusal to let him give up, her quiet strength during every setback. She had not been pushing him only for his sake. She had been pushing him to live the dream she could not. Suddenly, every moment of his life looked different, refracted through this new truth, but the questions did not stop there. If his mother had sacrificed her future for family, why had she never told him? Was she afraid he would feel burdened? Or was there more, something hidden still, beyond what this single paper revealed? Sundar looked at Modi, his voice low but urgent. Sir, why show me this now? What does it mean for me, for my work, for the life I am living? Modi's eyes were calm, almost solemn. Because, Sundar, India stands at a crossroads. Millions of mothers still sacrifice their dreams every day. Millions of children walk with the same hunger in their eyes that you once carried. Your mother's story is their story, and your success is their proof that sacrifice can bear fruit. But proof is not enough. We need change. And I believe that change must begin with you. Sundar felt the room grow smaller, the weight pressing heavier. He had always known his role as CEO was large, but now it seemed insignificant compared to what was being asked. He was being called not just to lead a company, but to honor an entire generation of silent sacrifices. His mother's hidden story had become the mirror through which he now saw the faces of millions. Before he could respond, Modi placed one final envelope on the table, thinner than the others but sealed tightly. Inside this, Modi said softly, is a message left for you long ago. It is the one piece your mother hoped you would only discover when you had reached the peak of your journey. I cannot tell you what it says. You must open it yourself. Sundar stared at the envelope, his hand hovering above it. His heart thudded like a drum, and he could almost hear his mother's voice, not in words but in presence, urging him forward. He swallowed hard, knowing that whatever was inside could change not just his understanding of her, but the course of his own life. He tore the seal open slowly, the sound sharp in the silence, and just as he unfolded the letter within, his vision blurred with emotion. The first words leaped out at him, and the room seemed to fade away. replaced by the weight of his mother's voice, speaking from the past. The room seemed to grow still as Sundar's eyes settled on the faded ink. His mother's handwriting was delicate yet determined, each curve of the letters carrying the weight of her silent years. He read slowly, his lips moving without sound, as though whispering the words to himself would make them more real. The letter began not with advice or encouragement, but with confession. "My son," it said, "there is something I never told you. I stayed silent because I wanted you to walk your path without shadows. But if you are reading this now, it means you have become strong enough to face the truth." Sundar's hands trembled as he held the page closer. Truth. The word pierced him. What truth could have been so heavy that even his mother had hidden it all her life? The letter spoke of choices made before he was born, of hardships greater than poverty. It revealed that his mother had once considered leaving Chennai altogether, fleeing from the weight of obligations that pressed down on her dreams. She had been offered work in another city, a chance to live differently, but she chose to stay because her family needed her. Years later, when Sundar was born, she promised herself she would never let him feel the burden of sacrifice as she had. She wanted him to believe the world was limitless, even when walls closed around them. Reading this, Sundar felt both admiration and sorrow. He had always known she was strong, but now, he saw that her strength had not come from calm acceptance. Alone it had come from battles within her own heart. Battles she had fought quietly so that he would never see the scars. But the letter did not end there. It carried a sharper revelation. She wrote of a man, a distant relative, who had once offered to fund Sundar's education abroad when his father hesitated, fearful of debt. The man's offer had been generous, but his intentions were not pure. Sundar's mother refused, unwilling to let her son's dream be tied to obligations that could one day shame him. Instead, she sold her own jewelry, convincing his father to part with precious belongings. Sundar's chest ached as he read this. All his life he had believed his path was secured by his parents' quiet support. But now he realized how close it had come to being tangled in a different story, one that could have shackled him with hidden debts of gratitude. His mother had shielded him from it, carrying the burden herself so that he could walk freely. His eyes blurred with tears, and for a long moment he could not continue. He felt as though his mother's presence filled the room, as if she were standing beside him, speaking the words aloud. He thought of every time she had told him to study harder, every time she had smiled at his small achievements, every time she had endured in silence. Now he saw those moments differently. They were not simply encouragements, they were her way of keeping him safe from truths too heavy for a child to bear. The letter closed with words that pierce deeper than anything else. "When the world looks at you, they will see success. But I want you to remember that your story is not yours alone. It belongs to every mother who has stayed hungry so her child could eat. To every father who has carried shame silently so his child could rise higher. Promise me, Sundar, that when you reach the place where no one can ignore your voice, you will use it not for yourself, but for them. Kindness is the only crown I wish to see on your head." The paper shook in Sundar's hands as he lowered it slowly. His chest was tight, his breath uneven. He felt both proud and crushed, honored and burdened. Modi said nothing, allowing him the space to absorb the words. The silence between them was not empty, it was filled with the echo of a mother's voice carried across time. Sundar realized that in this moment, his life had been divided into two halves. The years before reading the letter, when he thought he understood his journey, and the years to come, shaped by this new truth that demanded more of him than he had ever imagined. When he finally looked up, his voice was hoarse. "She never told me," he whispered. "She carried all of this, and I never knew." Modi nodded gently. "Our mothers carry more than we can ever see. But now that you know, the question is, what will you do with it?" Sundar felt the weight of destiny pressing down. He thought of his role at Google, of the millions of lives touched by technology, of the vast reach of his voice in boardrooms and governments. But he also thought of the children in villages, the mothers who still gave everything quietly, the fathers who walked miles for work. Could he bridge these two worlds? Could he honor his mother's final wish and carry kindness as his crown? Before he could answer, Modi's expression shifted. His tone grew sharper, carrying urgency. "There is one more thing, something your mother could not write in the letter. Something that has been uncovered only recently. It is about her last years, about a choice she made that affects you even now." Sundar froze, his heart leaping painfully. What more could there be? He thought he had uncovered every hidden truth, every buried sacrifice. Yet the look in Modi's eyes told him that the next revelation would cut even deeper. One that would not only test his strength as a son, but also shape his path as a leader. The Prime Minister's voice carried an edge of gravity, the kind that makes a man brace himself without even knowing why. Sundar's heart raced as he leaned forward, waiting for the words that seemed too heavy to arrive. Modi looked at him with eyes both gentle and firm. "In her last years," he said slowly, "your mother made a decision that even now shapes the path before you. She left something behind, something not of wealth but of responsibility. And until now, no one has dared place it in your hands." Sundar felt the air grow thick around him. His mother's sacrifices had already rewritten the way he saw himself. But what more could there be? He had read her hidden letter, discovered her lost dreams, uncovered truths about choices she had never revealed. Yet Modi's tone told him this was different, more than memory, more than sacrifice. It was something alive, still waiting to be claimed. An aide stepped forward and placed a worn notebook on the table. The cover was frayed, the corners bent, the pages swollen slightly from age. Sundar reached for it cautiously, his fingertips brushing over the surface as if he might disturb the silence it carried. He opened it, and his breath caught. The notebook was filled with his mother's handwriting. Not letters this time, but stories, dreams, ideas. She had written about children she saw in the neighborhood, about mothers who dreamed silently but never had voices, about a future where every child had a chance to learn without hunger holding them back. Each page carried her vision, simple yet powerful, as if she had been building a blueprint for a future she could not live to see. Sundar, single quotes, throat tightened as he turned the pages. She had not stopped dreaming. Even after setting aside her own education, even after giving up opportunities, she had found a way to keep her vision alive through words written in the dark, through hopes pressed into paper. And now, years later, those dreams had found their way back to him. He realized she had not only raised him to succeed, she had quietly prepared him to carry forward the mission she could not complete herself. Modi leaned closer, his voice quiet but steady. Your mother's notebook is not just her memory. It is a call. She wrote these pages not for herself, but for you. She wanted you to know that success without service is empty, and that true leadership is measured not by power but by the lives lifted along the way. The question is no longer whether you can honor her, it is whether you will. Sundar closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of it pressing against him. He thought of his childhood home, of the evenings filled with shadows of uncertainty, of his mother's quiet figure moving through the rooms with patience and resolve. He thought of the first letter, her confession of sacrifice, and now this notebook, her vision for generations yet unborn. It was as if her presence had been guiding him all along, steering him toward this moment when he would have to choose between living as a symbol of success and rising as a servant of hope. He opened his eyes, and they glistened with resolve. She carried silence so that I could carry voice, he whispered. She gave up her dreams so that I could create dreams for others. I cannot ignore this. I will not ignore this. His words hung in the room, fragile yet fierce, and in that instant, he felt a shift deep within, emerging of son and leader, of memory and destiny. Modi nodded, his expression softening. Then you understand. The future of millions will not be built by speeches or promises alone. It will be built by men and women who remember the strength of silence, the power of sacrifice, the courage of kindness. If you carry this forward, Sundar, you will not walk alone. You will walk with every mother who has ever prayed in silence, every father who has ever bent under the weight of struggle, every child who has ever dared to hope. Sundar looked down once more at the notebook, his hands steady now. He felt his mother's presence in every word, her spirit woven into the lines, her strength flowing into him. He realized that her final gift was not just truth, it was purpose. She had left him not with answers, but with a question that would define the rest of his life. What will you do with what has been given to you? The room was silent, yet within that silence was an ocean of meaning. Sundar felt the tears he had held back finally roll down his cheeks, not in weakness but in release. He rose slowly, holding the notebook against his chest, and looked at Modi. I will carry her voice, he said firmly, and I will make sure the world hears it. The Prime Minister rose too, and for a moment neither spoke. It was a silence filled with understanding, with respect, with the quiet acknowledgement of two men, bound not by titles but by the invisible thread of a mother's strength. As Sundar stepped out into the sunlight, the noise of Delhi rushed back to greet him, but inside he carried a new stillness, a clarity sharper than ever before. He knew his journey had shifted. He was no longer simply Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google. He was the living continuation of a mother's unspoken dream, and from this day forward, every choice he made would carry the weight of that truth. And somewhere, in the silence of memory, his mother's voice whispered again, not as a burden, but as a blessing.